I'm trying to pin this comment here. I think I did. All right, success. Frank, how are you?
I am well.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. Um, for the folks who don't know, Frank is he'll spend some time telling you how great he is in terms of Virginia wine. But I wanted to take the opportunity to shine some light on VA wine. I've been doing a lot of the Italian wines. Virginia is a region that I love. I've spent some time in the field with Frank, and so wanted to use the opportunity to share some of that. I'll be speaking with Luca tomorrow about Barboursville Vineyard, and so wanted Frank to provide that overview from which we can launch. I had asked Frank to find someone to fill this role, and like Dick Cheney, when they asked him to go head up that sword for the VP Bush, he came back and said, "I'm in." Yeah, so here he is. I met Frank, believe it or not, in Brescia, in Italy, at the DWCC conference, and we became fast friends there, and continued here. He would come to Orlando for work-related activities. We spent time drinking. I would go out into the field with him. We also did like case camps and stuff like that. So a long-standing friendship. It's really, really a pleasure to have him here with us. Frank, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you are relevant to today's topic.
Well, thank you, Keith. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know. I'm getting a weird feedback. Can you hear me okay, Keith?
You sound good and you look good.
Ah, thank you. That's even more important, but thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Frank Morgan. I live in the Virginia Beach, Virginia area. I have spent the last 10 years, I started writing about wine 10 years ago. Much of the writing that I do is about Virginia wine. I've written for most of the local magazines about the wine industry. I've covered the wines, winemakers, wineries of Virginia. I was associate editor of a magazine that was dedicated to the local drinks industry for about 4 years. And, I'm widely known as the Virginia wine guy. That's what, Keith, I think so many people still refer. I still write about other areas, but a lot of people refer to me as the Virginia wine guy. I'm not sure why, but other than I live here and I am a passionate advocate.
Yeah, because you're one of the biggest boosters of Virginia wine on the planet, maybe?
I guess, yeah, that's it. So yeah, I don't know. I see some people that I know wine savvy. Welcome. I hope all is well in Italy. Keith, it's just something that, because I live here, I've lived here for a while. I feel very connected with the winemakers and trying to tell their stories, because if I don't, I wonder who else will. There's not a lot of others that maybe would tell their stories.
Yeah, wonderful. Wine savvy, how are you? All right, so let's begin at the beginning. One of the things that when I first started reading the stuff you were writing, you did an extensive history of like 30 days of Jefferson or something like that.
Yeah.
Tell us the history of grape growing and winemaking there in Virginia.
So Virginia has a very deep history with the grape. A lot of failures, though. In 1619, the House of Burgess passed the Act 12, which required all settlers to plant and tend 10 grapevines. That didn't work out. Jefferson, of course, is widely created as, or widely known as the nation's first enophile. But he was a failure at growing grapes. He never made, he was a failure at a lot of things and a success at some. But he never made a drop of wine in his 4 attempts at Monticello. And I actually hold a contrary view. I'm not convinced that he actually really wanted to make wine. He kept, as you know, he's a copious note taker. Tens of thousands of documents he maintained over his life. So he's certainly a bit of maybe a narcissist. But he failed at cultivating grapevines for wine, and Keith, fast forward to the Monticello Wine Company, to the discovery of the Norton grape. Virginia has a long history of early failures with the grape, and really Virginia's wine history starts in 1976 when an Italian, the Italian wine scion, I think he's a fifth or sixth generation wine scion, Yanni Zonin, came to Virginia and bought a 830-acre antebellum property just north of Charlottesville called Barboursville, where one of our former governor's home was located. So that's really where Virginia's wine history starts, is in 1976.
So what prompted Zonin to come to Virginia versus Napa or someplace in France or something like that? What was his driving force?
That's a good question. So, I've had the opportunity to meet Mr. Zonin several times, and he's told the story, and I've read the story, and it really came down to him falling in love with that property in north of Charlottesville, the Barboursville property. You've been there. It's 830 acres, rolling hills, but I think he also recognized the potential. He traveled to California and some other regions, but realized that he could be one of the stakeholders, one of the original plank holders here, laying a cornerstone to the industry. And I think he realized the potential here in Virginia.
So draw a few from his initiative. So that was the launching point. That was the launch point, and he was basically more than growing grapes, right? That was a winemaking enterprise. To today. So what's the typical person producing stuff in Virginia? Are they a grower or a producer or a combination?
Well, today it's more of a combination. But going back, if I may, just stepping back to that time, Zonin brought Gabriele Rossi, who was an Italian winemaker, who had traveled around, went to New Zealand and Australia, and came to the U.S. and decided, Zonin convinced him to come to Barboursville and help plant that vineyard. And at the time, everyone laughed at him. They said, "Oh, well, that's a tobacco. This is a tobacco state. This is Virginia's an agriculture state, but it's a tobacco state." So anyway, fast forward. Now they have 195 acres under vine there. They're all estate fruit. I think Luca may sell. I think you're having Luca Pasquino on tomorrow, and they may sell some fruit, to other places. Although I'm not sure if they use all of it or not. But today, Virginia has about 300 wineries. The last time I counted, it was 285, 280-ish. Now they've grown. The problem is with some of the ones that are getting started is they planted grapes, but they don't have any yielding fruit yet, right? So now they're sourcing fruit, and there is a competition for fruit. Although now with the current pandemic, I don't know what the 2020 harvest will hold in terms of too much an oversupply.
So just a little bit off of the path that I set up, but the president owns some vineyard property in that state, right? And you want to talk a little bit about that, because I know that the prior owner was someone that you respected a lot.
Yeah.
Again, it's jumping ahead a little bit, but I popped into my mind. And get older, you forget stuff I want to talk about it while I'm remembering it. Talk about the history of that property.
Yeah. So right now there is a winery. A lady named Patricia Kluge, who was a very wealthy lady who had married John Kluge, who at the time, I think at one point, he was the richest man in America. And so they bought this enormous property, 2,000 acres in Central Virginia, beautiful property, beautiful property. Built this massive 50,000 square foot home on this property, and she wanted to make world-class wine. And so they started with a red blend. It was in this beautiful wooden box. It was $300 a bottle. But she also brought Claude Thibault, a Frenchman from Champagne, to the area to make sparkling wine under the Kluge label. And she spared no expense. I mean, she really did a lot. She took a lot of heat, but she also doesn't get enough credit for what she did for Virginia in terms of bringing a lot of expertise, Claude Thibault and some others, to this region, and she spent a lot in upgrading equipment, helping rising tide lifts all ships here. And she was divorced from John Kluge, and then there was a whole she went through a tough spout. She was a spender, so she spent a lot of money, found herself in difficult straits, and went into bankruptcy. And so in 2011, the Trump organization purchased the property. Was split up into 2 or 3 parcels, and they purchased the parcels bit by bit. At the time she had about 180 acres under vine, making beautiful sparkling wines. And of course, the story's well told. The Trump organization came in, lowballed, got a great deal. And now the winery is Trump Winery. It's based in still the same location, Charlottesville. And the same winemaker, Jonathan Wheeler, is still there. He's still there making beautiful sparkling wines. I haven't been there in a few years, but it's still there, and I suspect they're still thriving.
So she was selling $300 bottle of wine in what year?
Oh my gosh, I think that this was probably, I want to say it was about 10 years ago-ish, maybe 12, 13 years ago. It was, at the time it was called, I think it was still called New World Red, and it was a very high-end red in this beautiful wooden box. I'd never bought a bottle of it. I had a bottle, she would graciously invite people to her place for big wine events.
Are there any $300 bottles of wine in Virginia today?
No. The closest, I think, would be RDV's Lost Mountain, which I think is 130-ish. Hey, I just see Wendy Sula. Hey, Wendy, Wendy Pai, welcome. Hey, hope you're well.
All right, so let's talk about the things that make Virginia a viable wine growing environment. Let's talk about the physical characteristics of the Virginia region. Talk about the geology and the things like that are a part of the underpinnings of growing grapes.
Yeah, sure. So Virginia is a very diverse state, geographically, geologic. So there's 5 official regions in the state. Keep in mind, though, Virginia is a very long state. It's about 430 miles from the eastern shore to the western tip, and about 200 miles. Okay, that's a great map. Thank you. It's 200 miles wide north to south. About 65% of the state is covered in forest, so that's like pine, hickory, oak. The 35th largest state by volume, and so there, like I said, there's 5 official physical regions in Virginia's geography. I mean, that's the way we always learn it. One is the coastal plain, which is where I live. That's the eastern shore. It goes inland about 100 miles. So I live in the Virginia Beach area. And then you have the Piedmont, which you can see there in that green area. What was that, Keith?
That must be nice. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, well, right now we're getting a rainstorm, so I'm worried about the connectivity. So the Piedmont is that green area. That's kind of our largest area, and so the Piedmont is separated from the region I'm in, the coastal plain, by a fall line. So that's when all the rivers and everything tend to kind of fall off, and that runs through northern Virginia down through Petersburg, and then we have the Blue Ridge Mountain area. Elevations rise up to from sea level where I'm at up to 4,000 feet, and then you have the valley, and then you have the ridge area west of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And of course, the Blue Ridge Mountains, for any of you, I think Wendy was just on. If you've been here and you fly in on a plane, the Blue Ridge Mountains got their name because there's a blue haze above them. It always looks blue from the distance. Beautiful, beautiful to fly into. And so, beyond the valley and the ridge, then you have the Appalachian Plateau, which is that yellow section there on your map, to the far, far western Virginia. Virginia is a really diverse, geographically diverse state. I mean, in that Appalachian Plateau, that yellow area, I mean, it's tree covered, it's beautiful, very mountainous, very rich in coal. It used to be years ago a very avid coal mining town. or towns, plural. And now, I don't know that they're doing much of that today.
And in terms of, and grapes are grown across that entire spectrum, or which ones are least or most likely to have grapevines planted?
So that's a good question. Now, every corner of Virginia has grapevines growing, and almost every corner has apple orchards as well. So you can see on the far right of that map that you're displaying, the Eastern Shore kind of sits out there by itself. The Eastern Shore is a beautiful area, and it's an underrated area to grow grapes. It's very porous, sandy loam soils. And I said there's those 5 official geographic areas. I think the Eastern Shore should be its own. But so you have vineyards there. You have very expressive, salty Chardonnay there from Chatham Vineyards. Oh, I see Sarah. Hey, Sarah. Good afternoon. And then inland, most of the vineyards are in that green area that you have on your map there, the Piedmont. That's where the largest majority of wineries are. But there's vineyards planted throughout all of the areas, even in that far western tip in the Appalachian Plateau. They're everywhere, although the majority, of course, are in the Piedmont region.
So this guy, you and I were on. I apologize, it's not. So that's Jim Law, but he's too big for the picture. He is a large man in terms of his stature, but in terms of his weight on Virginia wine. But he told me that Virginia is one of the wettest viticultural regions on the planet. Yeah, they get Napa gets half of the rain that Virginia gets annually. Talk a little bit about the climate aspects of of Virginia.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Jim is right. It's wet here. It is just wet, sadly. I think that Virginia is considered a mild, humid subtropical climate. But if you're in here, you've been here in July and August, it is just a hot climate and sticky climate. When you move further in, it's a maritime temperate climate. But I did actually look at some of the rainfall amounts, thinking this might come up. So Virginia, on average, gets about 40 inches of rain a year. That's a lot. Now, I see people, logging into the feed. I'm curious for these I saw Wines of Greece and these other regions, how much rainfall they get on average a year. But Virginia gets on average 40 inches a year. And let me compare and contrast that. So I actually took some notes. The average rainfall temperature in Charlottesville, so that's Central Virginia, is 5.3 inches. Average monthly rainfall in July in Charlottesville. In August, it's 4 inches. So in September, it's almost 5 inches. Those are important months, right, to be getting all that rain. The Eastern Shore is a little bit more than that. But if you go, so basically in Virginia, you get 5 inches of rain on average a month, which is a lot, right? And some months, of course, are lower because we only get 40 a year. But if you go to Napa in those months, it's a small fraction, right? It's like a 0.3%, or even lower than that. And in Bordeaux, just to put it into some international perspective, they get roughly during those summer months about 2 inches of rain, a little bit less than that. So we get a ton of. Hello, Tricia. We get a ton of rain here relative to most other regions. And unfortunately, Keith, a lot of that rain comes at very inopportune times because, hurricane season in the eastern United States goes from, I think, June 1st to November 30th. And they all seem to come and hit Virginia around harvest time.
It is Christian Schiller. Remember him?
I remember Christian Schiller. Hello, sir. I hope you and Annette are doing very well.
It's like about 11, 19, wherever they are. They're probably in Frankfurt someplace.
Yeah. I bet you they are in Frankfurt.
Yeah. But because I saw him today on he was eating asparagus and drinking some kind of Riesling or something like that. And I was thinking about that. How does asparagus go with Riesling? But I'm sure it goes very well. So, but so there it is. You're a grape grower in Virginia, and you're getting these rains. And so rain is the biggest issue as it relates to to vintage differentials?
So a few years ago, I would have said yes, but now it's actually something different. What's happening now in Virginia, because of climate change, I'm not going to argue with people over climate change. I don't know if if you're going to post this later on video and then people will send emails and say, "Oh no, you're wrong."
On video, I forgot to tell you that.
Okay, so in any event, so I'm a believer in the differences in climate change, and right now in Virginia, we see that, and you see it through more unpredictable or more weather extremes. For instance, we had a very warm March here, bud break, and then a week later, 5 days later, a week later, Mother Nature drops a very big frost on the vineyards throughout the state, and a lot of vineyards lost crops. So yeah, rain of course plays a huge role. I mean, like 2019 in Virginia was a beautiful, stunning, hot, dry by our terms year. 2018 was a wet, soggy year. 2017 another hot, dry year. So it's up and it's down. It's up and it's down. Virginia has so much vintage variation. There's not a lot of regions. There are some, but there's not a lot that have as much vintage variation as we have here.
So, but going back to that range, you have stuff coming in from the west, stuff coming in from the east, right? And if you're coming in from the west, and come to the Appalachians, and they dump a lot of that rain on that side of the Appalachians. Coming in from the east, and come to the Blue Mountains, dump a lot of rain on that side. So there's parts in the middle there with that rain shadow effect. Are there vineyards in there that take advantage of that? Are there dry regions on the other sides of those mountains that have significantly less rainfall because of the mountains?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There are more and more wineries and winemakers are either buying properties like Michael Schaps last year bought Shenandoah Vineyards, one of the oldest vineyards in the Shenandoah Valley. And then other winemakers and wineries are setting up shops there because there's less rain in parts of the Shenandoah region. So if you look at, where Ben Jordan has a farm there. Ben Jordan is the winemaker at Early Mountain Vineyards in Madison, which is just a little bit northwest, 30 minutes northwest of Charlottesville. But an hour and a half west of there, you have the Shenandoah Valley region. He set up shop there because there is less precipitation, right? So there's less precipitation there in that Shenandoah Valley region because there is some mountain cover as the storms come in. But this is Virginia, man. This is a hot, humid, wet climate.
All right. So we talked about 5 geographical zones. They're also in list 5 climatic zones. But the Virginia Wine Marketing Board, they have a map of the wine regions of Virginia, which I'll throw up here. It's got like about 60. It's got a ton of different areas. Are those relevant to anything, or are those just marketing efforts? I mean, are those real differentiating kinds of zones from a wine drinker's perspective?
Whew, okay.
And I can pull that question back if it hurts you politically.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I have a very strong opinion about it. So I love the map that you display. That's a great map. The wineries have convinced themselves that the AVAs, that the regions matter. I'm not convinced that they do matter. That's just Frank's opinion. Now, if you ask the winery marketing folks, they say absolutely it makes a difference to put Monticello AVA on the label. Keith, my favorite wineries are my favorite wineries regardless of where they're based, because I just like the wines in those regions. I respect the winemakers. Let's say Jim Law, who's technically in Fauquier County, I guess. To people, I'm curious for those that are watching, Sam and others, do these AVAs, do these demarcated regions matter to them? To me, it doesn't, but it does help with some type of regional differentiation. Like the Monticello AVA is a very 33, 34 wineries of the Monticello region. ran their wine competition this year. They're very proud of that. I respect that. Loudoun County, the same thing. They're very proud of their Loudoun County roots. But, really at the end of the day, does that really help sell wine? I'm not convinced it does.
I'm not even concerned about whether it sells wine or not. I'm concerned about the differentiability of the wines. I mean, are those regions, either because of climatic conditions or because of soil conditions or because of human activity, where the winemakers are pursuing a specific mechanism for growing grapes and making wine, that you can distinguish the wine in region A, the wine in region B? Or is it just purely a marketing phenomenon?
Okay, so it's not only a marketing phenomenon, because there are some differences. I mean, look, if you taste some of the wines out on the Eastern Shore, there's a salinity, a salty vein that runs through those wines, and I love it. But if you move further inland to, let's say, the Charlottesville area, where you have all that red clay, there's a density there that you recognize. When I taste a Charlottesville wine blind versus another wine, I just kind of recognize it. And if you go further west, in my opinion, Keith, and there is a minerality. And I don't know how everybody feels about minerality. I think it's been determined by someone that we don't really taste minerality. I don't know. What do I know, right? But so yeah, there is some actual non-marketing differences, but I really think those go down to the site level. I think that if you take a site like a vineyard, Mount Airy, let's say in the Shenandoah Valley, it is very distinctive, regardless of what's on that map right there. It is distinctive, but a winery just 30 minutes north of there has a completely different distinction, because, as you know, I mean, there's so many other factors, and there's so much soil diversity, in Virginia, from sandy loam to hard clay to just mud, dirt, to quartz and granite. There's all types of differences, and I think it's more at the site level.
So is there like a body? So, for example, I was speaking to Antonio Benanti last week, and they have the consortio, right? And there are a bunch of different things. So there's like east, west, north, south in terms of regions. There's a contrast, and so they're set out to go do some soil study to, kind of come up with a determination as to what are those zones. Is there anything like that, or anybody like that in Virginia that's seeking to, cross that path between what the Virginia Wine Board has up there versus what you're saying, which is, at the level of the individual vineyards versus the broad geological construct? Is there anyone or anything looking to do?
Yeah. By the way, the Virginia Wine Marketing Office, they're doing a lot of that by funding a lot of these other efforts. I mean, the Wine Board, in my opinion, the Virginia Wine Marketing Office is probably one of the best regional marketing bodies in all of wine. They're so active. They are amazing. But in Charlottesville, you have the Winemakers Research Exchange. So right now, that's led by enologist Dr. Joy Ting, and she's doing a lot of soil studies by variety, what varieties are working better in what soils. But you also have the group at Virginia Tech, led by Dr. Tony Wolf. Dr. Bruce Zocklin formerly led that. Hey, there's Michael Kimball. Hey, Michael. So, Keith, there's a lot of that to identify not only what varieties are working best in our climate, dealing with humidity, and that's why a lot of winemakers are beginning to think more about hybrids or multi-species, or I call them multi-species grapes. But I get that from Lucy Morton, the ampelographer who lives in Charlottesville. But also, the Winemakers Research Exchange in Charlottesville. Virginia Tech does an enormous amount of work with soil studies. They have research vineyards throughout Virginia, and they're testing, like I said, not only the grapes' cold hardiness, heat hardiness, disease resistance, but also what's working better in various soils.
Yeah, and by the way, Zocklin was a world-class enologist in my view. But I'm going to come back to the wine marketing, because I want to give them the props. I want you to give them the props that I think they deserve. But talk to me about the challenges of grape growing slash winemaking in Virginia today.
Oh, well, climate. I mean, it's. In fact, I see Wendy Pai she could leave a comment because she worked here. She now with her husband Joseph live down in the I think they're in the Roussillon, but they both lived and worked here for a couple of years in vineyards. Keith, it is all about climate and just being at the mercy of Mother Nature, literally the mercy. You know, like I said, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, the weather was nice and warm, and there was bud breaks. The vines are coming alive. Then overnight, Mother Nature sends a cold front through. Winemakers are out with the smudge pots. They have the big fans going. A couple of them had helicopters going on, lots of bonfires. And, you know, one night they thought they made it through the night. As the sun is coming up, the temperature actually went down. And so the vineyard damage occurred from like 5 a.m. to 6:15 a.m. And that's when the vineyard damage occurred. So it's all about climate. And because Virginia is such a humid climate, it attracts every annoying pest there is. You know, I saw Wendy put beetles. Japanese beetles are a horrible annoyance, but so are the spotted wing dystrophia. It's a bug that punctures each individual grape and plants a larvae in there. So there's a lot of just working against winemakers here.
So some years ago, when we went to taste camp, I remember we went to one vineyard, and the whole issue of concave versus convex, plantings came up. And the winemaker was talking to us about the cold air coming downhill, and they had planted towards the bottom of the hill, and all that cold air came in and kind of like zeroed out the vineyard. Is that a big issue, or is that the problem that this guy had in terms of where you plant?
So, Keith, that is very site specific. And, you know, earlier what I said, we were talking about soil. I think that's very site specific because I could give you an example in Charlottesville where, you know, the aspect of one vineyard that I know is very prone to serious frost damage because it's on this weird kind of slope, what you said, this convex, not a concave, but a convex slope. But literally across the street, less than a half mile as a crow would fly, no frost damage at all because just the aspect, the vines are maybe a little bit higher and they're just a little bit higher, but it depends, Keith, on just every individual site because here you have two vineyards that are across the street from one another and one is very prone to frost damage and the other isn't. I wish we had the scientific answer, but what's that?
Site selection is the key.
Site selection is everything. If you talk to the pioneers like Jim Law, who you mentioned, talk to Luca Pasquino, who you're going to have on tomorrow, site selection, winemakers, even Jim Law, who planted his first vineyard in 1983, is still ripping out vineyards and replanting and reacclimating his site because he's learning.
Yeah. Let's talk about varieties. I remember when I first started coming into the region, there was a question is, what is the right variety for Virginia? And, so the question, has that been resolved? And no. So talk to me about the varieties and and the issues that you've confronted in that zone.
Yeah, so right now in Virginia, there are roughly about 75, 76, 77 grape varieties cultivated for wine, right? The most planted, no surprise, Chardonnay, the workhorse of the global wine world. Cabernet Franc is the second most planted, followed by Merlot, Petit Verdot, Viognier. Going back, I think when Wendy, who if she's still on, she probably remembers working with all of those grapes. But in 2011, Viognier was designated by the Virginia Wine Board as Virginia's official signature grape for marketing and branding. That has since been overcome by events. Viognier that was a little premature. Viognier is much too fickle for this climate, in my opinion. But I will tell you that I see some trends. One trend is varieties like Petite Manseng that are smaller berries, smaller berries, looser clusters where you can get some wind in there to help with some of the mildew and rot issues. Those are thriving. Petite Manseng is a dry wine is showing beautifully here. So Petite Manseng is being planted more. So is Albarino. Albarino wines have just come online. Beautiful. Just more and more winemakers are planting Albarino here in Virginia. So there's a lot of those sorts of varieties. I think Chardonnay is always going to be the workhorse. I think Chardonnay is very underappreciated, but I love Chardonnay. So, but Albarino, Petite Manseng, Petit Verdot is another one, thicker skinned grape that is showing great promise. I love the Cabernet Francs here when they're not over oaked. And let's talk about multi-species grapes. There's a lot of what a lot of people call hybrids. So I'm curious, for those of you that are on, what do you think about hybrids? Because, here I'm not a huge fan of hybrids. I'm an old worldy type of guy, a traditionalist. So I appreciate Merlot, Cab Franc, Chardonnay. But hybrid grapes, man, they're showing a lot of promise here because they're more cold hardy, they're disease resistant, and I think that's going to be an important part of the future.
So, was Petit Manseng in the conversation earlier on, or is this a recent happening? Because I can't remember running into that.
So it's relatively so Petit Manseng is something that has been played with in Virginia. When I mean played with, Dr. Tony Wolf at Virginia Tech, they have, like I said, several research vineyards planted throughout the state. He planted Petit Manseng grapes in the 90s. So he has been, and I saw Wendy mention Norton, of course, the largest single planting of Norton in the world is in the Middleburg AVA at Chrysalis Vineyards. And so Norton, of course, it can last. It has a lot of hardiness, both disease resistance, humidity resistant, and cold hardy. But Petit Manseng, Keith, is something that has been toyed with here for years, but it finally caught on. And I think I credit a lot of that to Michael Schatz, who the wine, I think, in my opinion, that put Petit Manseng, dry Petit Manseng, on the map here is the 2014. So we had a Virginia Wine Summit. Ray Isle came. He loved it. He raved about it. Oz Clark came, raved about Petit Manseng. And so I think that it's been here for years. And vineyard wineries have had it planted, but they were using it to add to white blends or even white varietal wines, just a splash to add some acidity.
But the wines that you mentioned a lot of white wines going in. So is it your sense that white wines are the future for this state? You did mention Petit Verdot and Cab Franc, but you think the white wines do better here?
Well, okay. So in my opinion, Virginia is a very diverse state. It's all site specific. And if you talk, it depends on who you talk to. So you're asking my opinion. Now, I concede. I love Cab Franc. I love Petit Verdot as a varietal wine here when it's restrained and doesn't get too crazy, brambly and rough. Tannat as well. Very, very delicious Tannats. The most regarded wines in this state are red Bordeaux style blends. But in my opinion, some of my favorite wines are Chardonnay. Jim Law's Linden Hardscrabble Chardonnay, to me, is the high watermark of what Virginia wine can be in terms of expression. And some of my favorite drinking wines are the Vermentino from Barboursville, just wines that I really just want to drink a lot of. The Vermentino from Barboursville, which you're going to talk to Luca tomorrow. So I wouldn't say that is the future of Virginia wine, white wines. No, I think the future of Virginia wine hasn't been defined yet. It's way too early for that.
So, I know that Jim Law is like the biggest Luddite on the planet, so it'd be impossible to get him on something like this. But as you were saying, his Hardscrabble Chardonnay, is in my book. And I'm a big Chardonnay guy. I love Chardonnay. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I love Chardonnay from across the front. I love his Chardonnay. And we've tasted some of those things. So we're talking about Jim Law. Let's expand it. Talk about the standout regions and standout producers from your perspective. And then we talk with producers. I mean, if you want to divide them into grape growers and winemakers, fine. But I'm looking at what's in the glass.
Okay. All right. So that's another hard question because you always hurt some feelings when you leave people out.
Yeah, you selected this job.
Okay. So let me phrase it this way. Let me. And this is just Frank's opinion. So if somebody's watching this now or they watch it later, this is kind of a field guide to some of my favorites. This is not exhaustive. So let's start on the Eastern Shore. The Chatham Vineyards Steel Chardonnay is one of my favorite Chardonnays. It's like $20. So delicious, so expressive, so much salty, saline notes. I love it. You move further inward in Williamsburg, at Williamsburg Winery, they have Petit Verdot that just somehow has found a home in those vineyards there in Williamsburg. I know Michael Kimball was just on. He worked there for many years, helped grow that brand. I love the Petit Verdot at Williamsburg Winery. But if you go further inland, I think, in my opinion, most of the state's most notable wineries are in that Charlottesville, the Monticello area. Barboursville, with their Nebbiolo, I think their Nebbiolo is a standout, especially when it has 5 to 7 years of age. Right. Beautiful wine. I love tasting my European friends who Wink Lorch, who you had on. She was here in October for a book tour. She fell in love with the Nebbiolo. So I love that. So for me, it's all about the winemaker and certain wines. I love the red blends from Matufino at King Family Vineyard, the Cabernet Franc at Afton Mountain Vineyards from Damien Blanchin, who's from the Beaujolais region. I love the sparkling wines from Claude Thibault. I think you probably met Claude or tasted his wines. His Blanc de Blanc is just beautiful. In that region also, I like Keswick. I mean, their Viognier is beautiful. I always miss these wineries when I start talking about them. So Barboursville Nebbiolo, King Family Red Blend, the Meritage is wonderful. And Matufino is experimenting with small batches, so doing a lot of skin contact, no sulfur wines. And that's what's cool about Virginia right now, Keith, is that there's so much experimentation going on. There's so much. I mean, so many cool winemakers. If we go west of there, I think what Ben Jordan is doing with his family at Mount Airy is fantastic. Early Mountain has some cool wines. Their Cabernet Franc from the Shenandoah Valley is beautiful. Of course, Jim Law up in Fauquier or that area. And then Jeff White at Glen Manor, who I can't remember if we went to Glen Manor or not when you came.
Yeah.
Yep, we did. Okay. So I love his Hotter Hill, there near Front Royal. And if you go up to the Loudoun County area, Nate and Sarah Walsh at Walsh Family, they're just doing so many cool things. So there's a new little small micro boutique producer called Quartzwood Farm. And then you have the standouts like Bro Vineyards. Their Nebbiolo, I think, is wonderful. They have Merlot, varietal Merlot that is just so stunning and beautiful. So I don't know if there's any one, it's hard to pick one or two producers from every region because I like what I like. I love the Chardonnays. I just ordered a bunch of them from Linden. Just ordered a case from there and there's so many just different wines.
So, it's funny. I just wrote down Bro while you were talking, and I wrote Nebbiolo and Merlot. And I had about the Nebbiolo until I put it there last year, and it was a young one, but it knocked my socks off. But but Bro, I remember it because that's where you left me in the bus when we were on a tour. And I of course had to sleep at the winery, until someone came back and got me. But their Merlot, aged for a bit, is a world class. It's a world class wine, and it surprised me because the vineyard is for like party city, and you think it's some place to go hang out, but they make some really good quality in back. Right?
Yeah, it's amazing. We talked earlier about the promising varieties. So 75 varieties grown here in Virginia, cultivated for wine. So many of them show promise. In my opinion, Petit Manseng, I don't want to drink a lot of Petit Manseng, but in terms of promise, man, there is no grape really well suited for this type of inhospitable climate. But Petit Manseng and grapes like that with the smaller berries, the looser clusters. Those are, but man, I'll tell you, Nebbiolo and some Merlots, holy cow, man. Some Merlot, varietal Merlots are just so beautiful. Barboursville Nebbiolo are just so stunning. But I'll say others for Petit Manseng, Michael Shaps, Horton, Early Mountain, just beautiful examples of Petit Manseng. And I just saw Wendy left a comment. Send over some hard scrabble.
Please. I keep telling Frank that every time I see him open the bottle, I just send me some of it. So you talked about the Petit Bordeaux, and I know that Lyndon, because Lyndon is my North Star. I love Jim Law. He's not the most lovable guy on the planet, but he is, to my mind, he's one of the really high quality winemakers on there. We spent some time with him last year, and he talked about that basically pulling out vines to remake his vineyard into where putting varieties where they deserve to be rather than where they were before. And there are not a lot of winemakers that will go into that kind of stuff. But he does I think his Petit Bordeaux is 70%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it changes, though. I think it changes by year, Keith. And by the way, he made one of the few Petit Bordeaux that I know of no oak.
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute. No oak.
Yeah. So, but you mentioned some other PV guys. Are they doing 100% or are they blends also?
There are some 100% Petit Bordeaux. I think that Veritas, I think Emily at Veritas is making 100% Petit Verdot. I think Shaps has 100% Petit Verdot. I will tell you honestly, I don't drink a lot of it. I did, or Cassinel too, Cassinel Vineyard. In Loudoun County at Cassinel, and I think that's 100%. I just don't drink a lot of it because it's just so big. And I'm a lightweight, man. I'm a light drinker. Hey, David Ramey, how are you? So I'm a lightweight. We drink a lot of lighter style wines. In fact, we were talking about Linden. I just got my order of Linden yesterday, and I bought a vertical of 2013 through 2017 Linden Hard Scrabble Chardonnay, and then I bought extra bottles, and so you'll see a few more of those pop up in the in my feed. But that vertical. In fact, the next time you and I get together, we'll open the 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17 Chardonnays.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I love that guy's Chardonnay. But by the way, Wendy had a question, two questions actually. She asked if any Virginia rosé is worth mentioning. This seems like a pointed question. And then she's asked any amphora or Yaras trending in VA.
Yeah, so, okay, the first question is rosé. I mean, rosé, I've talked to a couple winemakers every year for a magazine. I write a rosé, here are the rosés to drink this year, the newest releases. The magazines still want them, so I still write them. Last year I wrote one for a local paper, and it was one of the most read articles of the entire year. So people still love rosé. We drink it year round because it's just, it's light. We drink lighter style wines. I will tell you one of my favorite rosés is what we were just talking about, Linden. But Early Mountain is making a stunning, beautiful rosé. The Crozet rosé from King Family Vineyards, just beautiful. I like more of those lighter Provence style rosés. I will tell you, for me, the Merlot based rosés typically are my favorites.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not surprised. You're like off to the chain sometimes.
So hey, let me add.
Any orange wines there? Any experimentation in that arena?
Oh yeah. So I saw Wendy's question about amphora. There's several out and about. We even have a cider maker, Castle Hill Cider. What's that?
Wendy, by the way.
What's trendy?
Who's Wendy?
Oh, Wendy. She was in the comments there.
Yeah. Okay, but she's a winemaker there or a consumer? Or?
No, so Wendy Pai lives in the Roussillon right now, so it's late where she is, but she used to work here in Virginia.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So she actually, her and her husband, Joseph, met Wendy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you two, because Wendy is from South Africa. She came here to work. Her husband, who wasn't her husband at the time, came from France. His father is Joe Piton, so he came here to work. I think they met either at First Colony or maybe that wine bar that used to be on the mall area. But so she knows Virginia, and so yeah. So there are some amphora. We have an cidery doing amphora, but there is, Keith. I saw that you had the orange wine gentleman. His name escapes me right now.
Amber wine. Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy. His name escapes me, but so yeah. I'm going to look it up, but we have a lot of wineries, starting to explore. They've been experimenting with orange wines. Some of my favorite. Hey, Marta, I see Marta from the Monsant region of Spain. Welcome. Simon Wolf is yeah. So. So anyway, there's a lot of that. There's anything from skin contact Pinot Gris from Jake Bushing and Joy Ting in Charlottesville. Matufino has done a skin contact Viognier. I think actually did a skin contact Chardonnay. There's been a lot of that. Again, those are the sort of wines, Keith, that I appreciate, but I don't drink a lot of.
So, you guys have such bad weather, you probably don't have any, quote, standout vintages, right? Because everything is washed away.
Well, so we do, and that's just it. It's feast or famine here, from a viticulture perspective. So last year, 2019, is by most counts one of the best vintages in many, many years. 2018 was by most counts one of the wettest and soggiest years around. 2017 was a very wonderful, hot year, and some of the bigger wines were made in 2017.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's talk about how do winemakers make money there in Virginia? Is it primarily cellar door kinds of stuff? Are they restaurants sending wine to London? What's the business model?
Well, the business model is one that I don't know how sustainable it is in the long term, but essentially right now, between 90 and 95% of all wine that's made in Virginia is sold in Virginia. So that tells you what you need to know, that it's heavily reliant on tourism, people coming to the tasting rooms, and right now there's no one coming to tasting rooms, obviously, because we're in a shelter in place like every other state in the United States, and so they're doing a lot of shipping and curbside pickup. And I get it, because when you have people come to your winery, you maximize your profit, right? You maximize, but when you there's Nate Walsh. Nate Walsh just joined from Walsh Family Wines. I just mentioned Nate, how innovative you and Sarah are at Walsh Family Wines. But Keith, right now, so much wine is sold through the tasting rooms. Because, when you put wine into distribution, you're taking 30+% right off the top. And so, I think that right now the business model is going to have to, evolve a little bit. One, it's so expensive here to grow grapes. I hear a lot of times, oh, Virginia wine's so overpriced. Well, it's not overpriced because it's a very boutique, handcrafted product. And so I think the business model, Nate Walsh could probably weigh in on that, but it's going to have to evolve if the industry is going to have to grow. And by the way, to achieve some form of viticultural economies of scale, there's got to be a lot more grapes planted here. There just are going to have to be a lot more grapes, planted. I will tell you, if I owned a winery, I would want to sell all my wine through the tasting room or through a wine club, because that's where you maximize your profit. But to get your name out there, you got to put some in distribution.
There's a problem with that, though. if you're serving a captive audience, there's some issues as it relates to quality, right? I mean, you don't have to produce the greatest wines on the planet because you have the bachelorette parties coming. The incentive to strive for the best and the greatest wines is not necessarily there because you have a captive audience.
Yeah. And I will tell you, to me, going into some of the tasting rooms, um, going into some of the tasting rooms where that are more popular with these big parties. I call them the pink boa brigades, the bachelorette parties that rove around. I avoid those tasting rooms on the weekends because they're just tasting rooms are so crowded, during most of the year. So, but Keith, at the end of the day, it is what it is, and that's how wineries pay the bills. And it's good for the industry, I think, to bring more people to Virginia wine. I know one winery very well who had limited tasting room hours, but after this pandemic, they're going to appointment only.
Yeah, yeah. So when you were talking about the top, I asked you a question about standard regions and producers. You did not mention RDV. Was that a slip or was that on purpose?
No. It was just a slip. I mean, I don't, and it's primarily because I thought the question was more of what I drink. What do I like drinking? I don't drink a lot of RDV wines because RDV wines are at the very highest end of the pricing in our state. I think a bottle of Lost Mountain now, if we were to go to their website, I think it's roughly $125. Honestly, we just don't drink a lot of $125 bottles of wine. And by the way, as much as I love my home state, when you're selling a bottle of wine for $125, man, you're competing with a lot of high-end stuff from around the world.
So, and it's 5:56. These guys drop us at exactly an hour. So, quickly talk about the RDV infrastructure in terms of the team that they've put together to pull that wine out and why they are charging that kind of money. And our good friend Ben Thompson feels that this is an overpriced wine for the region, just as a matter of course. So talk about the team that they put into place.
Yeah, so first of all, I have huge respect for Rutger de Vink, who founded the property. He looked for many years for just the right property. I mean, you hear that a lot, but he actually did it. He went around, knocked on doors, scoped out places, took soil samples. He spent a lot of time as he worked with Jim Law at Linden, and he has assembled one heck of a team. I mean, Joshua Grainer, who is the winemaker there, is absolutely world class, and of course, everybody knows Eric Boissonnet from France. He's very well known. He just has Jean-Philippe Roby as well, doing a lot of the work there. So he has a great team. He has a great site, and his goal was to produce a world-class wine, not a world-class Virginian wine, but a world-class wine. And that's what he's done.
The wine is good. It's pricey, but it's good. Now, he had like an accident in the field with a tractor. Has he recovered from that? This is a year or so ago, I think, because we were supposed to go to Barolo Fest together, and then he had that accident and couldn't make it.
Yeah, I don't know all the details other than probably what you knew, which was online. I didn't speak to him. I figured it was a bad time to call. I did send an email saying, "Hey, I hope you're okay," because that news it was a tractor accident, and I mean that's a scary thing, right? Anytime you hear tractor accident, and it went through our industry pretty fast. I don't have any other. I mean, he seems fine now. I saw him not too long ago, and he seems fine.
Hey, Frank, I am going to, I could spend another half an hour with you, but I don't want us to be chopped off and, but thank you very much. This has been very, very informative. Like Dick Cheney, you came through it again.
That's a terrible analogy.
But, thank you.